Welcome everyone to another webinar. This is Quinn Arnold with Arnold and Moat Wealth Management, and we have Matt Hilland as usual with us today, although Matt and I will not be doing much of the presentation this particular time. Our special guest today is Erin Mies. She will be talking to us about career transitions and things that you can do to set yourself up well for that transition. I'm going to let Erin do her own introduction, but I want to remind everybody that we get these topics for our monthly webinars from clients and from questions and other topics that they want to bring up. So we think this is always a valuable way for us to share deeper knowledge and more in-depth topics than just what comes up during a particular client meeting or a conversation. So encourage you to send those questions to us. This one is obviously not about investing, and we like to do that as well. And so we think careers and focusing on your career is such an important part of anybody's life path and is a part of financial planning. So we're very eager to share this today. So I'm going to go on mute and I will send this over to Erin at this point. Erin, take it away.
Sounds great. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Mies, and I am the founder of Light Your Way Coaching, as well as another business that I'll share with you here a little bit more in just a moment. And today I really wanted to take a moment and talk with you, especially if career transition, whether it's moving into a new role, whether it's a return from some sort of leave or break in service that you've had, or just looking at a new opportunity for you. If there's some sort of transition in play or that you might be considering, what are those first three things that you can do in order to set yourself up for a successful transition? So with that, where I wanted to start was with this. And truth be told, I am terrified of heights. Okay. I'm going to share with you just a little story here. And as a kid, one of my earliest memories was being at a local community pool in the summer. I was probably maybe 6, 7 years old. And I finally had enough confidence to go off the high dive. I knew that I was a strong enough swimmer once I got in the pool, right? That for me, it was getting off that diving board. So I knew I could handle it. It just needed to be that I needed to jump off of this height, from this height that felt like to a 6-year-old about 100 feet in the air, right? So in that moment, I climbed up the ladder. It was my turn. There's a line of kids behind me. I see the lower diving boards on either side of me with more kids waiting to jump off. And I could even feel that diving board, that cold, grainy blue diving board that we all experienced as kids. And I was ready to go. Climbed up to the top of that diving board and started to step out. That's when I panicked. I completely froze. My stomach was in my throat. I couldn't move. And I could feel the stares. I could feel the laughing. I could even hear a little bit of the, just go, we're waiting behind you from the kids behind me. I was only a few feet from the end of it, and I couldn't move. Thankfully, my dad was there and was watching my terrified face. And rather than coming up as a parent and pushing me off the end, he actually took some empathy with me and helped me come back. He climbed up to the top of the high dive with me and helped me down so I could come down safely. And I thought about this as I began thinking about career transitions, because there's a lot of parallels here. We might know that once we get in that water that we're going to be successful. We know that we can do these roles. We know that we can do this work and we can be successful. And sometimes when we start to embark on that transition and on that change, it feels like we're that 6-year-old kid on top of the high dive, not sure if it's safe or if we're really, really ready to make that jump. So this picture, even as I was going through it to prepare for today, I got the goosebumps even looking at it, because there's even watching pictures with people at high heights makes me incredibly nervous. So if this feels like you, then I think we're in luck. We're going to have some fun here this afternoon. So a little bit about Light Your Way Coaching. So This business is really built on 20 years of experience that I've had in human resources, in recruiting, and in career consulting overall. Working with students, working with family members, working with colleagues, working with friends, specifically on making transitions of their own in their own careers. Most of the clients that I work with are early mid-career that are making some sort of career transitions, be it into new functions or new fields. And in some cases too, I work with parents who are returning to the workforce, maybe after a break, a period of time, to either care for family members, to raise kids, and they're feeling like they're ready to move forward. So a little bit about me overall. So in addition to Light Your Way Coaching, I'm the co-founder of People Spark Consulting, also up here. And we're an HR consulting firm that works with small and mid-sized businesses, specifically in agriculture, food, and manufacturing. For the last 3 years, I've also been working with the University of Illinois as an adjunct faculty member, specifically teaching a class in change and change management, and providing support for our master's level students in the School of Labor and Employment Relations for career consulting overall. Prior to going out on my own with People Spark and Light Your Way Coaching, I spent the first 14 years of my career between General Mills in manufacturing and corporate locations, including recruiting, as well as at Land O'Lakes Purina Animal Nutrition. But enough about me, let's jump in. So to make a successful transition, what are those first 3 things? We told you we were going to talk about 3 things. So what are they? The first one that I tend to work on specifically with my clients is to get clear on what you want and let go of the fear of missing out. Here's what I mean, and I'll share this study with you just to provide a little bit more context around why it's important. So back in 2009, there was a study done in Germany on specifically, you'll love this title, multisensory perception and action at the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics, right? It's a fun one. And what this study was looking at was, in the absence of any sort of landmark, an absence of light or other guideposts that somebody could use, could a person walk from point A to point B in a straight line? And in this study, this is actually the Google Earth image of this study, shown that the participants, if you look at participant RF, if you look at participant PS and KS, each of these participants believed that they were walking in a straight line, when in fact, some of the circles that they found themselves walking in were as tight as 66 feet. Smaller than the width of a football field. This participant, SM, had about 15 to 20 minutes of sunlight during their walk in order to provide a guidepost for them to know that they were walking in a straight line. So how does this factor into careers, into career transitions? A lot of times I work with clients, I work with students, and when I ask questions around what it is that they want to do, they have a much bigger kind of just throw something at the wall approach to their search. They're looking for just that next job, not necessarily looking at the specific industry, the specific experiences, or even the type of role that they would want to have. And I think about this particular study when it comes to career planning and career transitions, because the clearer you can be around what those guideposts are for you and what's going to be important in that next role, the better you will be able to communicate that as part of your search overall. The easier it will be for other people to help you as well. And we'll talk about networking here in a little bit. But getting really clear on those guideposts can really help that career transition. So for that, I want you to look at your own map. What is it that you are trying to do? Where is it that you are trying to go? So as an example, some questions that you can use to help you determine this are to really spend some time thinking about, Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And I don't mean the arbitrary question that you may find yourself answering in the course of an interview. This is more important for you to really internalize of what are the types of roles, experiences, things that you want to do in your career. What do you want to have achieved in the next 5 to 10 years? Because even if we don't step into that role next, we have an idea for where it is that you're trying to go. I want you to think too about what are some of those personal career goals for you, and why is that? Why are these things important to you? Where do some of your passions lie? Why is that? Sometimes, and I was just on a call facilitating a call a couple of weeks ago, and our panelists spoke specifically to a lot of times we find ourselves in positions because we're good at them. And we just continue on in that space because we're good at it and it might be easy for us, where in fact, it may not be the type of thing that we really want to be doing. And as you consider a career transition, this is the time for you to really be thinking about, am I doing these because I'm good at it? It's easy. Am I doing this because I'm good at this? It's easy. And I really enjoy doing this. I can see the impact that I'm making. So consider some of those questions as you begin thinking about this transition. Then I want you to go from this longer term focus into a shorter term one as well, of what are the type of skills that in these roles, experiences that you would need to be successful. Would you need to have some experience in a customer facing role as an example? Would you need to have experience doing analytics? Would you need experience? Name it. Think about what would be expected in those types of roles and those types of positions, and what are some of those skills that would be important. You can always look at job postings to get a good sense as well around some of those specific skills, because it'll be helpful here in a moment. We'll talk a little bit more about this, of thinking about the positions that you've already had to date in your experience and thinking through how, while you may not have had that exact title or that exact position, how have you begun to develop some of those skills, albeit in a different way, but you've begun to develop some of those skills already. And then finally, where do you want to work? Are there specific industries that are of interest to you? Are there specific industries that you have no interest in, whether it's from a moral, ethical, whatever, kind of just personal values standpoint that you don't want to work with? It is okay to name those things so that you can be clear when it comes to your search. And finally, think about your motivations. What are some of those things that really motivate you? And what are the types of experiences that you've had that have really drained you? That I can get it done, but I really can't stand doing it. All of this clarity, it might feel like, oh man, I know it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows in this next role. I get that. And it's important to understand this for yourself so that as you begin in your search, you can narrow that down. You can communicate it more easily to hiring managers, to recruiters, as well as to your network around what types of things it is that you're looking for. So the next thing that we can do is to connect the dots. When you apply to a role, when you send your resume to a company, or even into the hands of a colleague who might know someone in a particular organization you're interested in, a lot of times it feels like you're just sending that off into a black hole somewhere. I'm sure you've probably seen all of the same types of comments or jokes, or, in some cases, it's poor reviews of candidate experiences with feeling like they've been ghosted, never hearing back, never getting follow-up from organizations. Some of these things are true. I get that. And I've also been there on the recruiting side of the equation. And on the recruiting side of the equation, if I have a candidate that's coming through and I'm reviewing resumes for one job, and I see a resume and I don't understand how this role, how this person's experience might line up with this one, that takes an awful lot for me to try to connect these dots or know whether there are dots even there to be connected. And so our job, our role as a candidate is to help connect those dots in a more obvious way for that hiring manager and for that recruiter. So with that, what I encourage my clients to do, what I encourage my students to do as well, is to think about your resume as having two jobs. The first job that your resume has is to simply get someone's attention so that they want to keep reading. We want to capture enough of their attention in connecting dots for that person right away so that they want to keep reading. They say, oh, well, Erin might not be the typical candidate that I would be looking at for this particular role, but she's taken some time here to let me know that there are things that she's done in her experience that she feels could make her a good candidate. This also signals to the recruiter that you haven't just blasted your resume out to any particular posting, but rather you've been thoughtful, you've been intentional around those roles you've applied to. The other job that your resume has, once you've captured the attention of that reader, is to give them enough information that they want to learn more from you. We've demonstrated your impact in previous roles. We've demonstrated your accomplishments that they say, gosh, I learned a little bit from this person and I feel like there's more here to learn. I want to schedule that interview. We're not asking that hiring manager or that recruiter to make a hiring decision based on the 12 seconds that they've spent reviewing your resume. We want to get their attention, give them enough information that they want to make that call to action of setting up that phone interview or setting up that Zoom, Teams video interview with you to learn more. Okay, so if you learn nothing else, two jobs. Get their attention, give them enough information that they want to call. They want to learn more specifics around those experiences that you've had. Some of the ways that we can do that is just simply thinking about how can we make this easy for the reader? How can we make this easy for the hiring manager or the recruiter who's reading that resume? A couple of my favorite go-to tips here are to translate the experiences that you've had into terms or experiences required in the new role. You don't need to know all the jargon. You don't need to know all the lingo, especially if you're transitioning into a new field or a new industry. What I want you to look for and think through are the specific experiences that that person would need to be successful in the role. And how can we now go back to the experiences that you've had to translate them in a way that makes sense, where it doesn't take as much of my brain power as a reader to connect that dot for someone. As an example, a lot of the people that I've worked with, especially in the last few years, have been transitioning into roles within human resources in a lot of ways, just simply from my work at the University of Illinois. And in some of those experiences that some of my students, some of my participants have had, they may have had some customer service experience. Maybe they were working in more of the public sector, in counseling. I've seen some of these types of things as well. And what we try to do, what I try to work on with them is take some of the things that would be important for you within a role in that new field, in this case, within human resources. It's important to know about conflict management, how to navigate difficult conversations and facilitate them maybe between two parties that are quite a challenge. How can I take the experiences that I know that you've had already and make sure that the reader sees that, yes, you may not have worked in this field before, you've had these experiences that would make you a candidate worth talking to. The other thing that I think is critical that I often am giving feedback to clients on is quantifying your impact. A lot of times I see candidates who are undervaluing themselves significantly and not talking about the impact that they've had in their organization. So think about it in terms of, if I've been responsible for training new hires, that's great. How many? How many per month? How many per year? Do you have an idea for what turnover has looked like prior to you taking on that training role? Do you know what turnover looks like now? Sometimes you'll know some of this data, sometimes you won't, and that's okay. My goal is to get you thinking about ways in which you can quantify the impact that you've made on your experience. Another thing could be in looking at, have you been able to reduce, change a process to reduce waste? By how much? In what time period? What's the dollar impact or the savings that that's provided to an organization? A lot of times, you know this information already. It simply hasn't been notated in that resume, and we're missing that opportunity to demonstrate your impact. The last thing here to make it easier for the reader, and I mentioned this just a little bit ago, was around using the top part of your resume. This is typically right under your name and before either your education or your professional experiences. There's great real estate here, especially if you are changing, if you're making a change into a new industry, into a new function. If there's a transition of any sort here, career summary is a great place to talk about and connect some of these dots for that reader. This is the place where you can capture their attention. That I'm building on the 15 years experience I've had as an educator in moving into more of a role within corporate learning and development. So creating great learning outcomes for students, for participants. Thinking about how, again, I can capture their attention, show them that while they might not be reading the resume of a typical candidate that they would see, here's why I'm a candidate you should continue reading about. So the question that I encourage you to think about is that if you were to give your resume today to someone who has no knowledge of you or your current role, if they read through it, would they understand what you're talking about or why it's important, why it matters? This sometimes shows up in abbreviations, in some of the jargon that depending on our industry, we might be very common for us to use. I'd encourage you to not always think that everybody else understands that same level of jargon. Spell out abbreviations. You can always put them in parentheses afterwards, so you don't have to spell it out every time. But think about how you can make it as easy as possible for that reader to stay engaged when they're reading your resume. Okay. All right. Step 3, the third thing that you can do. One conversation at a time, build your network. This is usually the step that I get the most groans, the most eye rolls, the most, I know I should do that. And looking for other things that would be easier, quote unquote, easier to make that career transition. This, in addition, it's one thing to make the changes on your resume. That is great. It's critical to know where it is that you're going. And with those, now if I can focus on building that network one person at a time, we are starting to get ourselves moving towards that next landmark. So why is this important? This is not just Erin making this stuff up. In a recent study, this is 2022, even this year, up to 70% of jobs are never published publicly. So if you think about this is what I found, like, just about threw me on my heels and I read this. There's a lot of jobs that are posted out there today. So if I'm only seeing 30% of those, holy smokes. And a lot of those higher level roles oftentimes it is more challenging to find them. Those higher level manager, director, executive roles, a lot of times are working through recruiters. They're working through other networks in order to get them filled. The other thing, as many as 80% of jobs are filled through personal and professional connections. And if you think about this, if you are on the side of a business, the side of a hiring manager, to put a posting out there and to collect resumes in, I am going on absolutely no information about someone. I know nothing about them except what they have put on their paper. And I'm expected to make a very significant investment in my business in making a hiring decision to bring them on board. To reduce some of that risk to my business, we look for it's mostly a heuristic, right? That I'm looking for the shortcuts of who do I know that would know this person, who could recommend someone. Because now I start to feel as though, as a business owner, as the leader, I am minimizing some of my risk there in that investment. So if it's easier for you to think about networking, that it's more helpful for somebody to reduce that risk of making a poor hiring decision, that I encourage you to think about networking in that way. So networking, I get, can be challenging. Like I said, it's the one that I often get the most physical reaction from my students and from my participants and clients in. And yet we know that the stats are out here that this is one of the most effective ways to help you in your search. That doesn't mean that it needs to be challenging, and it doesn't mean that it has to be burdensome. Where I see clients succeed is not that they're out blasting 100 new people to kind of build their network on LinkedIn. It's more that they're taking the time to see who in their network might have something in common with them. Maybe we went to the same school. Maybe there's somebody who also moved from this particular profession into the one I'm interested in. Maybe there's somebody who is working with a particular company that I have an interest in as well and learning more about. In these networking conversations, you're learning not just about that person and that person's experience, you're also learning a little bit more about the company itself and whether or not that's a place that you are interested in continuing to look into. I am someone who loves having sentence starters and ways to kind of step into a conversation to make it a little bit easier. And to that end, one of my go-tos when it comes to networking sounds a little bit like this. So hey, Quinn, if I'm using this even in a LinkedIn message, I wanted to reach out because I see that you've had experience specifically leading teams in tech. I'm making a career transition into the field and wanted to see if you'd be willing to spend 15 or 20 minutes to share your story with me. With this, you are, one, being very clear that here are the things that we have in common with one another. This is not just me. The most common ones I get on LinkedIn right now are people who are very interested in my lead generation, who just want to help me do all of these things. This already tells me that you've done a little bit of homework before you've reached out to make a connection around what we might have in common. The other thing that you're doing here too is being very clear of how that person can say yes and how they can help you. Most people are very excellent storytellers about their own experience and are very willing to share that experience with you. And so this is a way that helps get them a little bit closer to being able to say yes for that. My bonus tip is that if you have a really good conversation with someone, one of my favorite go-tos at the end of that discussion with them is to say, gosh, Matt, I really enjoyed our conversation today in learning about this or learning about that. Who else would you recommend I meet with? In a very natural way. You don't have to use that. If you're not interested in the company, by all means, don't ask that. But if you've had a good experience, if there are things that you genuinely are interested in learning more about, this is your next ask. This is your next call to action of, who else would you recommend that I meet with? We're not asking for them to hire us based on our 20-minute conversation. We're simply building our network, each little conversation at a time. All right. I see head nods, which I appreciate. So where can we go from here? A couple of things just to start to wrap us up here. I mentioned Light Your Way coaching. With Light Your Way coaching as a business, we have a coaching course that you can find. Actually, the website is lightyourwaycoaching.co. And that particular course takes you in more detail through a lot of these steps and things that you can do as you start to set your course, as you start to work through, edit, revise, update your resume, as you prepare for interviews, work through your interviewing and your networking, as well as prepare you just for the change management that comes of it. Where even if we are moving from a role that we really can't stand today into something we really want, there are still elements of change that need to be addressed. Where even if I've really despised the role I've been in, it's still the role that I know today. And so I'm leaving something that I know and that I'm very familiar with into, stepping to the edge of that cliff to jump off into or off the high dive. The other way in which I work with clients are through intensive one-on-one coaching over the course of about a 3-month period, and where we meet regularly to help coach and guide you through not just the course, but also more intensive work to help you in that search process and to make that successful transition. So with that, I'll absolutely stay here for questions. And if you're interested, I'd love to invite you to join the mailing list. One of the things that you'll get it just by joining, if you text 33777 and text the word light, it will share with you, it'll ask you a couple questions, and then what you will receive is the resume impact checklist. So in that, it'll take section by section of your resume and give you a number of questions that you can answer as you go through your own resume to help build on some of those things we talked about, of ways that you can quantify your experience, ways that you can show more impact in that resume. You're always welcome to email me as well directly at Erin@lightyourwaycoaching.com. And with that, I am open for questions.
All right. Thank you, Erin. This was
You're welcome.
excellent. I feel not only more knowledgeable, but actually excited about this kind of stuff now.
Good.
That's good. It's good. Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think we had a couple of questions come in before the webinar that we just want to make sure that are raised. And so, Matt, if you could just ask those, and we'll see what Erin's responses are.
Yeah, Erin, I think one you answered real well, and that was on relating non-industry metrics. I think you covered that real well, but just since it was asked, if you wanted to kind of sum that up again, provide any more details, maybe that'd be good.
Yeah, I think, and in that, where I would go to, Matt, is look at the posting. So for those candidates who might be looking at specific roles or positions, take a look, and most companies too will have their values. They'll have a lot of behaviors and things that are important to them listed on their websites. Use that and get some of that research done ahead of time to know what's important to them. Because with that in mind, I can be looking at some of my experiences and say, okay, I haven't facilitated large group training discussions. What I have done is that I've been an educator for the last 10 years. So my audiences might be very different. Here are some ways in which I've impacted students in the classroom. Here are some of the results, whether it's testing results, whether it's other results like attendance. There's so many ways that we can quantify things and show impact. Oftentimes the response I get on calls with a lot of my clients are, I didn't even think I could talk about that. Yeah, I want you to talk about that. One of the ones I mentioned even a little bit earlier too was, if I'm responsible for this, what are some of the business outcomes? This could be anything from savings, from productivity, from, we're reducing waste, and getting really specific on it to demonstrate that impact can make a significant difference in it, especially if we're starting to translate it into the things that are important to that business.
Great. No, I think that's all. Thank you. Last one we had is asking about the role of a cover letter and how that's maybe the same or different as a resume.
This is a good one. And boy, can you get a lot of very polarizing opinions on cover letters, which I think is fascinating. So in my experience with cover letters, I would rather see you spend time on having a very, very solid 3, 4, 5 sentence career summary on your resume in the event that that cover letter does not get read by a recruiter. A recruiter is likely looking through, who knows, in some cases, it might just be a handful of resumes. In other cases, depending on the position, they might be looking through 50 to 100 to several hundred, and we want to catch their attention quickly. So if you are making a significant career transition, it would not be a bad thing to have a cover letter ready to go in that where you may provide more detail around why you're making the career transition that you are, why you're going from this field into this one, why you're moving into this particular industry, the type of things that are most important to you in your next role, and the types of experiences that you want to gain. So even thinking about it as a broader career summary, and then we shorten that up now on your resume just to make sure that you have that common theme that gets woven throughout it. So it won't hurt to have one, especially if it's well written and is able to connect those dots for that recruiter or for that hiring manager who's reading it.
Great. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's the last question we had. Thanks so much, Erin. This was awesome.
Awesome. You're welcome.
Yep. Thank you, Erin. We encourage everyone viewing the webinar to reach out, and then you got Erin's contact information. If you did not see that earlier, please ping us and we will connect the two of you because we do like networking also. So good. All right. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.